There are certain behaviors that, if you tolerate in a woman, you will deeply regret. These signs aren't just annoying, they're dangerous. Each one reveals that the relationship is off balance, that you're slowly losing your emotional authority and becoming a dimmed, invisible, frustrated version of yourself. The problem is, most men don't notice it. They tolerate, stay silent, rationalize, and end up swallowed by a relationship where their wounded masculinity becomes the norm. Maybe you think she'll change, that it's just a phase. But let me give you the truth no one talks about. Once a woman realizes you accept everything quietly, she stops respecting you. And from that point on, the game changes. She leads, you adapt. She demands, you apologize. She messes up, you feel guilty. My friend, this is the beginning of silent self-sabotage. That's why, in this video, I'm going to show you the 5 most common behaviors you must never accept. If you want to keep your value, your peace, and your self-respect, watch until the end, because the last behavior might look like love, but it's actually a hidden form of control. If you miss that detail, you'll fall for the same trap again, and won't even know why. Let's start with the most common, most overlooked, and maybe the most destructive behavior of all. First sign, when she tests you. And you don't even notice, the first behavior you should never tolerate is when a woman starts testing you. Emotionally, verbally, and sometimes even publicly. It might seem like a joke or playful teasing, but make no mistake, it's a way of measuring your emotional leadership. When she provokes you, intentionally delays replies, ignores your messages, or drops subtle jealousy traps to throw you off, what she's really looking for is your reaction. And if your response is weak, passive, or overly emotional, you lose ground. The connection begins slipping into something superficial and unbalanced. This is where wounded masculinity starts showing. When a man trades posture for approval, these tests usually show up when the woman senses she can get away with it. It's like she's asking without words, how far can I push him? And when a man allows it, rationalizes it, or even tries harder to please, thinking it will strengthen the relationship, he's already entering self-sabotage mode. Instead of setting boundaries, he tries to buy peace with submission. As a result, he loses her respect and her desire. A classic example, the guy who laughs along when she makes jokes about him in front of her friends, just to avoid seeming too sensitive. Men with weak boundaries tend to confuse being nice with being permissive. The difference lies in silent firmness. A solid man doesn't need to shout or lash out. He communicates through his tone, his gaze, his posture, and it's clear. There's a line. That alone shifts the emotional dynamic. A practical suggestion? When you feel like she's testing you, don't react impulsively. Breathe, observe, and calmly say something like, "If that was a test, it won't work on me." Simple, clear, drama-free. That alone can change everything. These tests might seem small at first, but if left unchecked, they become habits. And that's when toxic dynamics appear. She manipulates, he complies. She accuses, he justifies. She disappears, he chases. The issue isn't just her behavior, it's his need for approval. This constant thirst for validation weakens any masculine stance. Without realizing it, he drifts from his core, loses focus, falls into a sexless routine, and fades out. A real-life example? Those guys who spend their whole day texting their insecure girlfriend, constantly trying to reassure her. They think it's love, but deep down, it's an escape into the fantasy that if they sacrifice enough, she'll become more peaceful. But no one respects someone who gives themselves up completely. Behind this behavior is usually deep male loneliness, a void desperately trying to fill itself with female validation. And don't be fooled. Women can absolutely love a strong man. In fact, they need it. When you make it clear you won't be tested, that you don't dance to her mood swings, you awaken something deeper, respect. And where there's respect, true desire follows. The relationship thrives. Without it, it turns into a cold war disguised as romance. And deep down, she feels it too. She knows when you're standing as a man, or just trying to please her so she won't leave. Now the problem gets worse when those tests evolve into something even more dangerous. Emotional manipulation disguised as affection. That's where many men fall, without even realizing it. Second sign, when her opinion matters more than your life. One of the subtlest, yet most dangerous, mistakes a man can make is abandoning his own life purpose to please the woman he loves. It starts with small changes. He cuts his hair differently because she didn't like it, stops seeing certain friends because she disapproves, even lowers his career ambitions because she says, "You're already doing fine." Gradually, he stops being the author of his life and becomes a side character in someone else's story. All of it wrapped up in love. But really, it's all about external validation. This pattern shows up often in men who've lost touch with their inner compass. They constantly try to adjust to what she wants, dreams, or expects. But what looks like partnership is often self-sabotage buried in the chest. Because when you hand over your compass to someone else, they might steer you, but they won't respect you. No woman admires a man who bends completely to fit her mold. She might enjoy it for a while, but admiration? That fades. Soon, that man falls into silent crisis. He wakes up tired, works without purpose, moves on autopilot. Everything might seem fine on the outside, but inside, there's a muffled scream. This isn't me anymore. That's when lack of purpose is born. A life with no direction. And believe me, when a man loses his sense of mission, he loses everything, including her respect. Because a man without a path becomes emotionally dependent. And no one wants to carry that weight for long. How do you know if this is happening to you? Ask yourself, do you avoid saying no to her even when you want to? Do you feel guilty when you disagree? Have you given up personal goals just because she frowned at them? It's more common than you think. And underneath it is the need for approval, often rooted in old, untreated male loneliness. That deep fear of rejection, of being alone. As if her love were the only thing keeping you alive. That a high-value man doesn't live in constant conflict with his partner. But he also doesn't live in submission. He listens, reflects, respects, but decides with clarity. He knows his purpose comes before the relationship. Not out of ego, but out of awareness. Because how can you lead a relationship if you can't even lead yourself? If you've lost that core, start by reconnecting with your personal mission. What moves you? What inspires you? Read The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. It's short, deep, and transformative. The right woman will always feel drawn to a man who knows where he's going, not the one constantly asking where. She wants him to go. So if you feel like you're losing yourself just to make her happy, stop now. Take back the wheel. And don't be surprised if, when you do, she starts looking at you differently. Because a man with vision becomes magnetic. It's not about looks. It's about presence, energy, direction. But if you ignore this for too long, something starts growing inside the relationship. Unrealistic expectations about who you're supposed to be. And when those expectations take over, the gap between who you are and who she wants you to be becomes unbearable. Third sign, emotional coldness that turns into silent punishment. One of the most damaging and sadly, most common behaviors is intentional emotional coldness. That sudden shift in her tone, her eyes, her body language. She doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't talk. She simply withdraws, ignores texts, responds with fine, avoids physical contact, sleeps turned the other way. At first, it seems like a bad mood. But when it becomes a pattern, it's not just moodiness. It's punishment, a silent punishment. And the man who accepts this without action or communication falls into a cycle of communication noise that destroys any chance at real intimacy. This coldness doesn't come from nowhere. It happens when a woman realizes she can control the emotional climate with silence. And the man who already lives with fragile boundaries and fear of loss switches into repair mode. He starts pleasing, checking in, chasing after her affection like he's begging for scraps. But affection should never be begged for. When a man feels the need to negotiate for love, he's already lost. Because real love is given, not demanded. Presence should never be a bargaining chip. The real danger goes beyond discomfort. This pattern creates anxiety in the man. He becomes alert, tense, constantly blaming himself without knowing why. That builds repressed guilt, a persistent sense of doing something wrong, even when there's no clear evidence. Over time, he begins to go silent. He doesn't speak his mind, avoids confrontation, pretends everything is okay. And if he brings it up, she brushes it off. You're imagining things. That invalidates his experience and deepens the emotional prison that in this kind of dynamic. The relationship turns into a minefield. Any misstep could lead to another cold night, another ruined weekend. What should be a safe haven becomes a constant tension. Many men try to fix it with gifts, trips, overcompensating, but none of it works. Because what's missing isn't material, it's emotional leadership. The man needs to stop, look her in the eye, and say calmly but firmly, "This silent treatment doesn't work with me. If there's something to say it. If there's something to fix, let's fix it. But punishing me with absence is disrespect." Real life example: she disappears for 2 days after a fight and comes back acting like nothing happened. No apology, no conversation. That's not maturity. That's emotional immaturity dressed up as independence. And if you let that slide once, she learns she can do it again. Women test limits through actions, not speeches. She wants to know if you can stay grounded, even in the face of her emotional storms. This kind of repeated coldness often pushes men to seek compensation elsewhere: porn, distractions, even other women. Not out of lust, but emotional starvation. The superficial connection and lack of genuine affection open the door to fantasy-driven escapes. That's where the relationship begins to die, through emotional abandonment on both sides. The touch fades, sex dwindles, the eyes stop meeting. All that's left is routine without soul. And just a quick pause here. If this content is opening your eyes to things you used to overlook, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This is just the beginning. Let's keep going. When this kind of emotional coldness becomes normal, it opens the door to something even more dangerous: contempt disguised as honesty. Now let's move on to the fourth behavior, one many men mistake for honesty, but it's actually pure emotional poison. Fourth sign: hurtful truth disguised as just being honest. One of the most toxic behaviors a man can tolerate without even noticing is the infamous brutal honesty. Those words dressed as truth, but soaked in destructive criticism, cutting judgments, and subtle comparisons. "You're getting a bit chubby, aren't you? Look how so-and-so treats his wife. You're not as ambitious as I thought. You were." All followed by, "I'm just being honest." That's not honesty. It's a lack of empathy, tact, and respect. And a man who accepts that as normal becomes numb from his own wounded masculinity. This kind of attitude chips away at a man's confidence over time. He starts walking on eggshells, trying to avoid one more jab or look of disappointment. He becomes overly self-conscious, loses his light, his humor, his spontaneity. What should be an emotional sanctuary becomes a courtroom. And behind all that, a deep need for approval that traps him in a cycle, trying to impress her, be better in her eyes, when what he really needs is to look inward and heal his neglected self-awareness. Phrases like, "You're weak," a real man wouldn't care about that, or "You're overreacting," don't reflect honesty. They're emotional weapons. And these attacks rarely come through yelling. Often, they arrive with a smirk, irony, or a tone that sounds mature. The man, afraid of being labeled too sensitive, swallows his pain. He goes quiet, and the silent resentment builds until it becomes chronic frustration. The truth is, honesty without empathy is cruelty. And yes, you can and must stand up to it. A practical example: when she criticizes you under the guise of honesty, calmly say, "I value truth, but I won't accept being hurt in the name of it." If you have something to say it with respect. That sentence might seem obvious, but many men have never said it because they've been conditioned to believe that enduring everything makes them strong. It doesn't. It's emotional self-sabotage that if you don't set clear boundaries on how far she can go with her words, she'll test. Not necessarily out of malice, but instinct. Just like men test physical boundaries, women test emotional ones. And if she sees she can cross that line without consequence, the filter disappears. The relationship turns into a space where she speaks and he swallows. That creates a massive communication gap, an ongoing emotional distortion where no one feels truly seen, just wounded. This dynamic also kills desire. The man stops feeling desirable and starts seeing himself as a project in need of fixing. And when that happens, the relationship cools off. Sex becomes just another task. Intimacy fades. There's no admiration, just mutual tolerance. The couple becomes roommates, not lovers. And the worst part? They both think it's just how long-term relationships are supposed to be. And when the man finally explodes, he's labeled unstable, aggressive, too sensitive. But no one saw the daily paper cuts, the micro-humiliations, the years of silence, swallowed out of fear of losing her. And once that becomes the pattern, he no longer even recognizes himself. But there's still hope. It all starts by recognizing that not all honesty heals, some honesty destroys. And speaking of slow destruction, the next sign may seem like affection, but it's actually the opposite. A sneaky behavior disguised as care, but hiding the most dangerous form of control. Fifth sign, affection that becomes disguised control. This one even deceives experienced men, because it doesn't come with yelling or demands. It comes wrapped in excessive care, exaggerated concern, with lines like, "It's only because I care," or "I just want what's best for you." Then slowly, she starts deciding for you what you should wear, who you should hang out with, where you should go, what you should avoid. At first, it looks like protection, but in reality, it's a sophisticated form of emotional control. And the man who doesn't see it ends up caught in a web of emotional self-sabotage. Labeled as love, this type of control moves slowly. First, she helps you improve a few small things. Then, she's correcting everything. Before you know it, you're asking for permission just to live. And the worst part? You think that's what a healthy relationship looks like. It's not. That's the absence of emotional leadership. It's what happens when you allow the woman to take the wheel of your life. Not because she's cruel, but because you forgot that your path is your responsibility. And any man who outsources his decisions loses her respect and his own. Over time, this dynamic creates a deep internal disconnection. You begin to doubt your own intuition, your strength, your vision. Everything needs her approval. Every move goes through her filter. That's a clear sign of external validation. And the longer a man lives like that, the more he erases his core. He loses spontaneity, firmness, presence. His eyes change. His body changes. His energy shifts. And that ripples through everything. His career, his focus, even his sex drive. A real example? The man who stops accepting invites from friends, avoids social events, gives up hobbies, even turns down job opportunities because she doesn't feel comfortable. That may look like loyalty, but it's actually confusion between love and desire. True love empowers. Possessive desire paralyzes. If you see yourself in this pattern, try this exercise. Look at your life today and ask, how many of my choices are still mine? How many are shaped just to keep her happy? If the answer unsettles you, it's time to rebalance the scale. This disguised control also creates an illusion, the idea that the relationship is working. After all, you don't fight. She handles everything. You never complain. But that peace is anesthesia. Behind it is a loud, aching male loneliness. A man physically present, but emotionally absent. A man living to please, but who no longer feels seen. And that's where the emotional void grows, the kind that drives him toward distractions or even other women. And here's the truth. Sometimes, that kind of woman doesn't even know she's doing this. She learned to love that way. But you're not here to be molded by her past trauma. You're here to be whole, a complete man. And that takes firmness. It means being clear that affection isn't an excuse for control, that love is not a cage, and that you'd rather face uncomfortable truths than stay trapped in a superficial connection full of fake harmony. If you don't set these boundaries, the relationship becomes a golden cage, beautiful on the outside, suffocating on the inside. And by the time you're ready to leave, you might not even know how. So hear this. Pay attention when affection crosses the line into disrespect. And never settle for anything less than mutual freedom. Because at the end of the day, the only thing a man should tolerate in a relationship is the truth. Now tell me, how many of these behaviors have you tolerated thinking they were normal? How many signs did you ignore just to keep the relationship afloat? The truth is, while you keep pretending not to see, you'll keep being tested, used, and pushed to the background. But the moment you set boundaries, not with yelling, but with clarity and firmness, everything begins to shift. Not because she changed, but because you did. You want to be seen as a man or as a project that needs fixing. The choice is yours. But know this, life will keep handing you the same lesson until you finally choose to stand up. So what's it going to be? Are you going to apply this? Or go back to swallowing your truth with a forced smile? Drop this in the comments. Starting today, I won't accept anything less than respect. Write that below if this video spoke to you. Thank you, truly, for sticking with me to the end. That alone tells me you're chasing real growth, and that already puts you ahead of 90% of men out there. If this helped you in any way, click that like button, share this with a brother who needs to hear it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications. Because what we're building here changes lives.